On Sunday, May 2nd, 2010, 48-year-old husband to Stacey and father to 7-year-old Kinsley and 5-year-old Connor, Edward Fewer, whom everyone just called Ted, originally from Newmarket, Ontario, and now living in Calgary, attempted to pull a model rocket away from a power line in a park area near Strathmore and was electrocuted. He died 2 days later at the Rocky View Hospital on May 4th, 2010. Ted Fewer had been the son of Ronald and Iris and had two sisters, Donna and Helena. Ted and his wife Stacey had an on-again, off-again relationship. Trouble in the marriage had started over the death of their infant son Sean on December 27, 2004, who had died of SIDS at only 10 months old. Sean had been a bright light in Ted and Stacey's life and had started walking at only 9 months and described as engaged, happy, and outgoing, loving to sit on anyone's lap and watching them smile. But that had all come crashing down on that December day, just after Christmas, when Stacey, who was pregnant with Connor at the time, had put little Sean down for a nap at 3 and then went to check on him around 4:15, only to find him lying on his side with a stuffed animal partially covering his face, with his hands and feet cold to the touch and clear liquid coming from his nose. In a panic, she had called Ted and then 911. EMS had tried to revive him at the scene, but he was pronounced dead when he arrived at the hospital. According to her mother, Joyce, Stacey blamed herself for Sean's death, and perhaps a bit of Ted did too, leading to the issues in the marriage that were not fully resolved. And it sounds like, although remaining friendly and at least co-parenty, they resided in different homes close to each other, so they had separated sometime after Sean's death. The kids stayed with Mom Stacey and Ted had the kids on the weekends, but that changed in the fall of 2010 when Stacey needed to go to work full-time. So the schedule had changed and Kinsley and Connor had stayed with their dad during the week and then Stacey had them on the weekends. Then, of course, that changed again after Ted's death in early May 2010 when Kinsley and Connor returned full-time to their mom Stacey's. The relationship between Ted and Stacey wasn't really broken, though, even though Stacey was now going by her maiden name Bourdeaux again. After Ted's death, Stacey had started a journal in which all her entries had started Dear Ted, when she would talk out her feelings and things that she just wanted to tell him. Stacey had always been a journal writer. She had for years kept a journal where she would start with the date at the top, the time, and then write about her day. But after Ted's death, she had started a separate journal to talk to Ted and sometimes write her thoughts for her children. On May 24th, 2010, Stacey and the kids were at home, and Kinsley was playing with some games on the family's laptop. Kinsley was 7 at the time, and her little brother Connor was doing what younger brothers do and bothering her. And then he spilled some orange juice on the laptop. Not enough to ruin the laptop, but enough to irritate Kinsley to the point that she told him to go away or get lost or now look what you did, and the kinds of things that older sisters say to their younger brothers. Connor, being 5 and still likely reeling from the death of his father only 3 weeks before, retorted back, "I wish you had died instead of Dad." Harsh, but again, he's 5. As a consequence for his outburst, Stacey sent Connor to his room, and she followed him up the stairs as he trudged to make sure he didn't make any pit stops on the way to his punishment. Stacey told Kinsey to stay downstairs, where she heard Connor cry on and off as his mum talked to him. All very normal so far, at least if you have more than one kid close in age who get on each other's nerves. Around 8 p.m. that night, Michelle Parasol, who used to live in the area, dropped off her son's friend Justin, who lived next door to Stacey. They had spent the day at Callaway Park, and when dropping Justin off, she remembered Stacey and the kids and that Ted had recently passed away, so she knocked on the door to give her condolences. And when Stacey opened the door, she gave her condolences as she was planning to do. She saw Kinsley in the living room and said hello to her and then asked where little Connor was. Stacey said that he wasn't feeling well, but mentioned that his color was blue. Alarmed, Stacey asked if she could see him, and Stacey told her he's fine. Just a little bit sick, he's sleeping now. He's going to be fine. Michelle offered to drive them to the hospital or call an ambulance for her, but Stacey said, a little bit defensively, that she has a phone and that her benefits would pay for an ambulance if it required that. But he's fine, I'm sure he's fine, he's just a little bit sick. But Michelle wasn't convinced, and something about her conversation with Stacey told her that she shouldn't just let the matter go. So when she got home, she called Justin's dad, Kevin, who remembered lived next door to Stacey and the kids, and asked him to go and check again on Connor if anything had changed with his status. And so he did that. Stacey told him that Connor was still sleeping, he's going to be fine. Kevin also offered a ride to the hospital, and again Stacey said it wasn't necessary. Kinsley had heard her mother mention that Connor was sick and blue, and it worried her. So on her way to bed, she peeked into Connor's bedroom and saw him sleeping on his side, but had scratches on his nose and bruises on one of his arms. She said his arms were, quote, kind of like robot arms, and he was breathing funny, like he had phlegm in his throat, end quote. The next morning on the Tuesday, Connor woke up and told Stacey and Kinsley that in the night he had wet and pooped the bed and had thrown up, all of which he didn't remember doing. Stacey cleaned up the mess in Connor's bed and gave the kids breakfast, but Connor was shaking and having trouble feeding himself. So she went over to Kevin's place next door, bringing a shaking and not walking right Connor with her. Stacey told Kevin a lie while he smoked a cigarette and observed what he considered a very sick child. Stacey said that she had taken Connor to the hospital the night before, but that they had sent him home like nothing was wrong or just he'll get better at home. Kevin saw the scratches on Connor's face and asked about them, and Stacey said that he had done that to himself in his sleep. Kevin was rather disbelieving that an hospital ER would send a child back home that was obviously in very bad shape. But there are no reports indicating what, if anything, at the time Kevin questioned her further on, or why Stacey had taken Connor over to Kevin's in the first place. I wasn't there, but chances are Kevin advised Stacey that Connor needed to go back to the hospital and she needed to demand treatment for him. But whether he said any of that or not, it didn't happen. Instead, Stacey took the still shaking and still not walking right Connor, who you will all remember was only 5 years old, back home with her, where she waited. And then on Thursday, so now 3 days after his mysterious illness, she went back to Kevin's and this time asked him to drive them to the hospital, which of course Kevin said no problem to, seeing that Connor didn't look any better and was now being carried by Stacey into the car because even just standing up had become too challenging for him. Alarming to Kevin was overhearing Kinsley whisper to her mom why she was trying to send Connor up to Daddy. Now, capitalizing on Stacey's vulnerable position and, well, likely that she realized that Kevin had overheard Kinsley's comment, he asked her kind of in passing if she had used a pillow or her hands when trying to suffocate Connor. Distracted by, I guess, the stress of the situation, Stacey matter-of-factly responded that she had used her hand and that his heart had stopped a couple of times. So with that, Kevin drops off Stacey, a gravely ill Connor, and Kinsley off at the Alberta Children's Hospital and immediately returned home to call the police and tell them all that had transpired that he was aware of over the last 3 days. At the Children's Hospital, the at-risk response team, otherwise known as the CARET, was called in to meet with doctors at the hospital. They work in pairs of one police officer and one child welfare worker. I was only able to get the name of the officer as Constable Titzing, who the court refers to him as a he, no name on the social worker. Police also notified the child abuse unit of the police, who assigned detectives Witt and Palmer. Again, no first names or genders provided for them. So the Carrots team, their job is to assess the children's welfare and what, if anything, they can do to ensure their safety. It's the job of the abuse unit to investigate any criminal charges. So they're kind of two different roles. So they all showed up at the hospital shortly after little Connor was dropped off with his mom, and upon arrival was still able to speak and was put in the waiting room with his mom and Kinsley. Stacey admitted to the triage nurse that she had hurt Connor, but didn't go into any details about what she had done or when she had done it. Constable Titzing and the social worker showed up when they were still waiting to be seen. Constable Titzing told Stacey that he was there to look out for Kinsley and Connor, and Stacey answered his background questions about names and dates, including mentioning Sean's birth date and the date of his death. Connor was then taken into an examination room to be assessed by Dr. Catherine Smart. And the social worker stayed with Kinsley and Stacey, and and Constable Titsting stayed in the room as well. The detectives had not yet arrived from the child abuse unit. When Dr. Smart asked Stacey what had happened to Connor, she told him that she had tried to suffocate him by putting a hand over his face on the Monday, so 3 days prior, and that he had fought with her, so she had then used a pillowcase over his head and twisted it around his neck. During the 2 hours, yes, 2 hours that she struggled with him, he would at times lose consciousness, and then she would think he was dead, but then he would take a deep breath and start breathing again. So finally, she had given up, and then during the night, he had lost control of his bladder and bowels and was having trouble walking straight the next day and couldn't hold his cup of juice at breakfast. He wasn't getting any better, so she went to her neighbors to have him take him in. Dr. Smart asked about the scratches on his face, and this time she said that they happened when he was trying to pry her hand off of his mouth. Connor was taken in for an MRI, and another doctor asked him how he had gotten his scratches. And Connor said that he had gotten them when fighting with his mom when she was trying to send him to his dad. Detectives Witt and Palmer arrived and placed Stacey under arrest for attempted murder, choking with intent, and failure to provide the necessaries of life. And when interviewing Kinsley, besides her telling them about how Connor had looked the night of the 25th when she peeked into his bedroom, told Witt and Palmer that her mom had told her that she was being mean to Connor and didn't know why, but that she had suffocated him. She was astute enough to understand the word suffocate and that it means when someone can't really breathe. As she relayed that her mom had said that she didn't know why she had done it, Kinsley said that she thought the marks on his face were because he had been fighting to stay with Kinsley and Stacey and didn't want to go up to heaven with their dad. Or maybe their dad was an angel watching over to make sure that he wouldn't go. Amanda McDonald, who was a good friend of Stacey's, told Witt and Palmer that after she had been arrested, she had come to visit her in remand, and Stacey had told her that Connor had been having a temper tantrum and she couldn't handle it. Making it worse was that Connor had yelled at her, "Why couldn't Daddy be alive and her dead?" Stacey's stepmother said that her and Stacey talked on Facebook regularly and that on Thursday morning the day that they had gone to the hospital, Stacey had only told her that Connor had the flu or something, but called her on Friday the 28th to tell her that they were at the hospital because she, meaning Stacey, had attempted to kill herself or unalive herself as the TikTokers say, had hurt Connor. She mentioned the temper tantrum and that she had tried to suffocate him. And then detectives Witt and Palmer executed a search warrant on Stacey's house. And that's when they took a look at those journals that Stacey liked to write in. They found a number of them dating from 2003 all the way to 2010. Obviously, they started with the entries around the time of Connor's injury. In the journal that she would write to Ted, on Sunday, May 23rd at 7 p.m., she wrote, "Today wasn't a very good day for me. I did some crying along with a lot of thoughts that I shouldn't be having." In her regular journal, she wrote about doing some household chores and that she'd been having stomach aches throughout the day. The next entry on Monday, May 24th, 2010 at 10:20 a.m., she writes in the TED journal that she has been having some thoughts of suicide and that it might be better if she took Kinsley and Connor with her so that they wouldn't be left alone, and writes these chilling words that pique Witt and Palmer's interest. "If I do anything, it would be this evening, though. Now that you're gone, I can confess about Sean now. The night that he left us, it wasn't actually while he was sleeping. Due to me being very sick at the time, I did what I didn't want to do. The crying wouldn't stop, so I ended up putting a pillow over his face and made sure that it was stopping his breathing. I know it's something that I shouldn't have done, but I did. I know it's something any parent shouldn't do. I knew that I couldn't handle 3 kids more or less on my own, because with Sean being quite sick at first, that's why I ended up moving out with the 2 kids. This is something that I can't let anyone know about until I'm gone myself, which may be sooner than we all think. That's it for now, though. Maybe I'll go lay down for a bit again. Still not feeling very good." Detectives went back to her regular journals to the days leading up to Sean's death, and between December 20th and January 1st, 2005, she didn't write anything unusual or incriminating. The only mention of Sean was in the top margins, where on the 27th she writes, "Sean passed away," and on January 1st she wrote Sean's funeral. The next entry and the only mention of Sean in any substance form was on January 4th when she wrote, "Lots has happened in the last little while. All the family was up. Sean ended up passing away just after Christmas. It seems different just having Kinsey here now." And she comes back to the TED journal later at 9:30 p.m., which was after she had tried to suffocate Connor, and she wrote, "Well, the kids are now in bed for the night. Connor wasn't doing very good when he got in trouble. He ended up staying upstairs all night because of it. Kinsey was the only one that had supper tonight. I had her quickly go to co-op by herself. I do hope that Connor will be okay in the morning. I probably won't go into work tomorrow because of him. I will see how he is in the morning. I may need to take him in, though. Connor seems okay for now. I just went and checked on him. Earlier he was sick for a while. I think I'll see how he is in the morning to determine whether I keep him home or not." And she makes a note about rolling a big joint and then continues, "I really do hope that Connor will be okay. I was trying to send him to you, and if I lose him now, I'm going to feel really bad because it would be my fault. I don't know what I was thinking when I was doing. I can say that he's very tough and a fighter. Last I checked, he's still breathing and asleep. He kind of scared Kinsey and I at one point, though. We were both in his room because his eyes were open, but he wouldn't do anything. We couldn't even get him to do anything or respond to anything. But he was breathing fine and his heart going good. Last time I checked on him, he seemed okay. He was breathing right and I checked his heart. I plan on checking him right before I go to bed, too. I really hope that he'll be okay. I don't know what I'll do if I end up losing him, too. And I really hope that if he is okay, I didn't damage anything. I do feel bad about doing what I did. I'm just not sure why. It was the same with Sean, too. To this day, I feel that guilt of losing Sean, too. I know I should never have done what I did to Connor. I shouldn't have done it with Sean either. I have never forgiven myself for it, and I never will. Now you are the only one that knows if you do watch down on us. I am very sorry for what I have done. I should be doing it to myself. I'm off to bed, though. More in the morning. Let you know how Connor is." And the next morning at 7:35 she writes, "Well, it's the beginning of yet another day without you here with us. Connor is still with us, but he's not doing very good at all. Anytime he starts to do anything, he starts shaking. I really wish that I wouldn't have been so selfish. I should have just left him alone. I have decided to keep him home today, though. He seems to be doing okay, but not 100%. When he gets up to walk, he tends to fall. He can't have a drink without help. He sure is quite the fighter, though. He says he has aches everywhere. I just gave him some Tylenol to see if it helped. I have cleaned his room this morning, too. Last night he ended up pissing, shitting, and puking in his bed. Right now his bedroom window is open to help air it out. In a bit, I'm going to take him to have a bath with me. There is puke on his face and in his hair. Kinsey can have a bath this evening. I do feel really bad for what I have done. Today is 3 weeks since we made the very hard decision to take you off life support." And then at 10:50 a.m., Connor and I had a bath earlier as he had puke in his hair and on his face. I got his sheets into the washer. I need to do his blanket and PJs from last night. He says he's not feeling very good, very achy all over. Once Kinsley is home from school, I should take him in if he's still the same. I don't really want to, though, now because they'll know I did something or someone did something. I do feel really bad for what I have done, too. My sadness and hurtness shouldn't be something that I take out on them. Connor's face looks pretty bad, too. He's got scratch marks on his nose, by his eyes, from him fighting back. He's a true fewer. I do feel really bad about what I've done. On Wednesday, May 26th, so the day before she finally takes Connor in, that day, she started early at 5:50, where she writes that she plans on keeping Connor home for one more day just to make sure he's fully better, and about her plans for Kinsley's birthday party and taking the kids to see Ted's dad on the weekend. She mentions that she will phone someone named Tamara and let her know that he's not going to be coming to school. With the marks on his face and the neck, she doesn't want him to be seen. She writes, "At least Connor is still eating properly, though. Yesterday he had the shakes and aches. Hopefully today won't be so bad for him. The shakes and aches was probably due to the lack of oxygen. I feel really bad for what I've done. I now sort of wish I had done it to myself. I don't deserve to still be here after doing that. He's a fighter, though." And then at 6:10 a.m., she writes in her regular journal, Yesterday, I kept Connor home and I'm keeping him home again today. On Monday night, I tried to take his life. He's quite a fighter, though. Yesterday, he was all achy and had the shakes. That was why I kept him home. I can't really afford not to go into work, though. And then she goes on to talk about her chores that she has to do and some other plans for the day. At 7:30 that morning, she comes back to her TED journal and says, "Today I should try to clean up a bit seeing as I'm not going to work again today. The other night I tried sending him to you, but he didn't want to go. I fought with him for probably 2 to 3 hours. He is truly a fighter and a true viewer. Yesterday, Connor was eating fine, but this morning he doesn't seem to want to eat anything. He's still drinking juice, though. I have a feeling that today isn't going to be a good day. My thoughts aren't very good again. I don't want to lose Connor, too. Maybe I should be thinking about taking my own life instead. After Monday night, I don't deserve to be here anymore." At 10:30 a.m., he now has problems with getting up from sitting or laying. He has problems with walking and gets shaky quite a bit. I know that's all due to what I did. There were a few times when I thought he was gone, but he'd come back. I guess that was his way of saying he didn't want to leave us. I really hope that he's not like this for life, as childcare for him will be really hard. I really wish that I didn't act on my thoughts the other day. If I take him to the hospital, they will probably know what I've done something. Then I would probably lose both of the kids. Right now, his face has a lot of scratches from his fighting back. That's all for now. Then again, starting at 3:10 p.m., I may need to take Connor to see a doctor soon. He is having problems with walking any distance and seems to have no control over his bladder bowel movements. Tomorrow, I will probably have to go to work as it's short shift, see how he does. I know that this is from what I did to him, and I do truly feel bad about it. At 5:15 and 6:15, she writes about doing some household chores and then doesn't mention Connor again until 8:35 p.m. writing, "Tomorrow I will send Connor to tomorrow's. I will send him extra pants. Since the other night he seems not to realize that he's peed or pooped his pants. I feel really, really bad because his issues are my fault. I just really hope that Connor comes out of having the balance issue. I don't know why I did what I did. He's a true fighter, though." So Stacey was questioned about Sean's death after reading her cryptic passages about him, and she only said that she didn't mean for it to go that far and couldn't remember if she had used a blanket or a pillow, but that she had put it over his face. Dr. Litwin, who was the forensic pathologist who had conducted Sean's autopsy, was asked to review his report where he had indicated that Sean's death was due to SIDS, which is basically a fancy medical term for kind of like shrugging when a baby dies, and said that it was just as consistent with soft smothering. And these kinds of deaths of infants are really difficult to determine, and without any evidence of prior abuse or neglect, they usually determine SIDS, which is completely fair. I don't think that there was any evidence to suggest that Sean's death was sinister in nature. I think it was a secret that Stacey was probably prepared to go to her own grave with. Now I'm going to come back to what happened to little Connor, but first I want to go through the legal stuff. A charge of second-degree murder was added to Stacey's charges of attempted murder. The second-degree charge was downgraded to manslaughter, and she pleaded guilty to all of the charges. And in 2012, Justice Terry Semenick sentenced Stacey Bourdeaux, she was going by Bourdeaux at the time, to 8 years for the attempted murder of Connor, 4 years for the manslaughter of Sean, and 1 year for failure to provide the necessaries of life, all to be served consecutively, but with 3 years and 5 months taken off for time served. She was 34 years old at the time, working all of that out with time served and when she could apply for parole. It likely worked out to about 5 months in a minimum security prison, and she's probably been out for a good decade. But the Crown did try to appeal for an extra 5 years, but in 2013 that was denied, and the short sentence remained. Now, here's some stuff that you may or may not find interesting. Stacey was obviously assessed by a forensic psychiatrist at the time of her arrest. And now, trying to go back and assess and determine her mental state back 5 years earlier at the time that she killed Sean was nearly impossible. However, Dr. Santana, who evaluated her, concluded that even if she had postnatal depressive disorder after the birth of Sean, she didn't have any symptoms of it by December of 2004 when she smothered him. Not even symptoms of depression at that time. She was also found fit to stand trial in the event that she hadn't pled guilty. There was actually no evidence of her having any major mental disorder. At the time that she arrived at the hospital, she could have been having a depressive episode and perhaps adjustive disorder, which would have actually been related to the sudden and unexpected death of her husband. Which brings me to what he did find as far as motives for both Sean's murder and Connor's attempted murder. He concluded that attempting to kill Connor was accidental filicide and a little bit of retaliating filicide. Now, don't get all upset just yet. Filicide is broken down into about five categories. And with accidental filicide, it can be a number of different types of child abuse and fictitious disorder imposed on another, which is otherwise more widely known as Munchausen by proxy. So basically, it's hurting a child to fulfill some kind of unmet needs in yourself. And retaliating filicide is generally to punish the spouse. So in this case, her anger over Ted's sudden death and her being left to raise both kids entirely on her own. So when it came to Sean's murder, he did concede that there was no intent to murder Sean, but before his murder, Ted had left her after an argument, and that had enraged her. And when Sean had started to cry, she basically saw red, herself as a victim, unable to cope with the thought of caring for three children at home all by herself, which feels a little bit like intent to kill, but I'm not a doctor. So anyways, he also said that she had limited cognitive abilities and problems understanding what she had done, blaming prior abuse that she suffered in her childhood as a reason for both the murder and the attempted murder. But it had not caused her to lose touch with reality at the time of either the murder of Sean or the attempted murder of Connor. So she did know what she did. I'm confused. It sounds like a lot of poor me on her part. Now we get to little Connor, and sadly, I don't have a lot of great news for you. When Connor came to the ER, he had sustained severe anoxic ischemia, something with his brain, which is doctor speak for the poor little guy was very sick and had gone for a period of time without oxygen to his brain, making him unable to control any of his movements. He was rigid, he was in a lot of distress, he was crying, sweating, and had not slept for at least 18 hours. Although he had initially been able to talk, he deteriorated very quickly and could no longer open his eyes and was having difficulty swallowing. With this I don't know how to say it, the oxygen to the brain thing, it causes a cascading effect in the body, so causing the brain cells to slowly die. But had he been brought to the hospital the night of his smothering, they might have been able to cut some of it off at the pass. Now, making a full recovery is impossible to know. It's unlikely, but waiting 3 days to be treated did definitely make his situation a whole lot worse. At the time of Stacey's sentencing, he still could not talk or walk and was in a wheelchair and could not swallow food, so he relied on a feeding tube. And to make this story even more sad, 3 months after his admission to the hospital, his cognitive ability was tested, and he was actually in the 95th percentile, meaning that he was highly intelligent and trapped in a body that no longer worked for him. He also has epilepsy now with 3 to 4 seizures every day of his life, which in 2012 was only expected to be for a few more years at the most due to his initial brain injury. He was in the care of child welfare, and both him and Kinsley are in foster care or were in foster care at the time. It is unlikely that Connor Fewer is still alive. I wasn't able to find any updates on Kinsley, whose identity was protected, but I actually do know her actual name, at least at the time. She would be 21 now, and I'm hopefully doing well. However, at her sentencing hearing, Stacey did tell the court that she hopes one day Kinsley will forgive her, and she hoped that she could reconnect with her after she gets out. Good Lord, I hope she didn't try to find her. And if she did, I hope Kinsley slammed the door in her face and got a restraining order. Forgiveness is definitely one thing, but you can forgive someone and never have to see them again.